Discover the amazing journey of regret to hope, 7 surprising lessons to transform your life today. Jacob stood in the dusty attic, each box a testament to years gone by, filled with the echoes of dreams he once held close. As a high school science teacher in a small Midwestern town, he felt like an imposter in a life defined by responsibility rather than ambition. Memories of the man he could have been plagued him, stifling any desire to look ahead. The walls of the family home seemed to close in, the weight of his father's passing pressing heavily on his chest. Jacob longed to be a celebrated researcher, to make strides in the field of science, yet here he was, trapped in a classroom, disillusioned by missed opportunities. Among the clutter of his childhood, he uncovered his father's journals. The pages revealed tales wrapped in sacrifice and resilience, letters breathing life into the struggles of their immigrant family. Jacob felt the familiar sting of regret. His father's brilliance was overshadowed by circumstance, a profound mind lost in the shadows, just as he feared his own would be. He sensed a flicker of inspiration rising within him, a spark that beckoned him to reconnect with his former professor, the one who once nurtured his ambitions. Yet, as hope swelled at the surface, doubt clawed back, whispering chilling reminders of inadequacy. What if he failed? What if he was never truly worthy of the legacy his father had built? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But as Jacob embarked on this renewed path, insecurities crawled back to the surface. Each step forward echoed with whispers of an unimpressive life, colleagues who seemed to soar while he remained earthbound. When a professional setback threatened his integrity, it felt like a cruel twist of fate. Layers of societal prejudice unfurled, exposing the weight of his father's immigrant status, a burden that was never truly his to carry yet loomed larger than life. The question ricocheted in his mind: honor his father's legacy by pushing back against injustice or retreat into the safety of silence. He traversed the fragile line between standing for what was right and succumbing to fear. The very project that propelled him to seek change felt like the very roots tethering him to his past. As he prepared his presentation aimed at reimagining success for the students in his town, the closing weight pressed down harder. Just moments before he was to speak, the air crackled with urgency as news broke. A school board decision threatened everything he had ever known, including his livelihood. At that moment, he stood at a precipice, poised to confront a truth that could reshape his life and the lives of others. Jacob gazed out at the crowd, faces both familiar and unknown filling the room with uncertain anticipation. Would he fortify his voice against fear, echoing the quiet courage of his father, or would he falter yet again? The tension acted like a noose tightening around him, his heart racing, the moments flooding by. Just as he opened his mouth, time seemed to stall, and an unspeakable truth loomed before him. Would this be his moment where potential met action, or would he once more yield to the shadows of doubt? Jacob's gaze remained anchored on the crowd, their expectant faces blurring as doubt settled thickly in the air. Each heartbeat drummed a question through his mind: what if this presentation was not only about changing lives but also about proving his own worth? As the silence stretched, the memory of his father's journal seeped back, urging him to lean into his truth. He inhaled deeply, each breath a crystalline reminder of his father's perseverance despite the odds. With a resolve he hadn't felt in years, Jacob spoke, his initial words stumbling out clumsily but gradually gaining strength. Today, we envision a different kind of success, one that transcends standardized tests and hallways echoing with conformity. The words felt new, tinged with a resolve he had long denied. In the moments that followed, he found a rhythm, his narrative weaving the threads of personal and collective aspirations. He illustrated how scientific curiosity could spark joy, how learning should ignite passion rather than just ambition. With each point he made, the faces in the audience transformed from passive observers to active participants, slowly leaning forward as if to pull his ideas closer to them. As he closed with a passionate call to action, urging the board not merely to see their students as products but as the future scientists, artists, and thinkers of tomorrow, he felt something shift. Applause erupted slowly at first, then a wave of synchrony that surging past him like an unexpected tide. In that moment, Jacob understood, he was not merely speaking to the audience about ideals, he was also reclaiming his story, standing up against the anonymity of his past, but as the applause echoed, shadows lurked beneath the surface. He caught sight of a board member, arms crossed, skepticism etched into her features. The trap of mere compliance threatened to close in once more. While one victory surged, he felt a new undercurrent of tension rising, a challenge to his budding sense of self-definition. In the days following his presentation, Jacob tried to harness the momentum he had created. However, returning to the familiar classroom felt stifling, and he could hardly focus on lesson plans. Instead, he combed through the pages of his father's journals, searching for hidden wisdom within the narratives of resilience. It became an obsession. Each entry revealed dreams that were muted by necessity. In those writings, he sensed a connection, a shared yearning that mirrored his own, but in his pursuit of clarity, new questions haunted him. Was a single presentation enough to ignite lasting change? What were the next steps? The corridor walls seemed oppressive as whispers of doubt re-emerged, unraveling his confidence. He began to contemplate the school board meeting that was approaching, addressing the very members who held his destiny in their hands. Friendly encouragement from his colleagues turned into anxious thoughts of potential dismissal or ridicule. Would they see him as an advocate for progress or merely a voice from the past? The balancing act of authenticity and ambition felt precarious. A deep-seated dread climbed within him, reaching deeper than mere fear of judgment. It was as if he feared the unraveling of the rebirth he had just begun to embrace. Would he step boldly into this next confrontation, or would he retreat into the familiar shadows where complacency reigned? As the day of the board meeting loomed closer, Jacob felt the stakes rising higher than ever, challenging everything he had fought to embrace. Fractured confidence gripped him while sparks of hope glimmered fleetingly. Here lay the crossroads. Was this another moment to showcase his potential, or the threshold where all could unravel? He couldn't hide from the truth any longer. He would need to confront the very fears that threatened his rediscovered dreams. As the day of the board meeting approached, Jacob's mind frantically churned with fragments of thought and emotion, a tempest brewed in a confined space. Each passing hour felt heavier, laden with the weight of his aspirations and the looming specter of failure. The familiar setting of the staff room became a prison, its walls stifling his ambitious resolves. He grappled with the haunting singular question: what if this confrontation exposed the depths of his inadequacies? A knot tightened in his stomach each time he replayed scenarios, the dismissive glances, the scoffs of doubt, the unyielding cynicism he sensed from that one board member. But amid the tempest, a glimmer of determination flickered. Revisiting his father's journals had ignited something dormant within him, weaving in threads of his father's unfulfilled ambitions with his own burgeoning courage. Each of his father's aspirations bore a lesson, hinting at transformative possibilities. Jacob realized he couldn't merely step into that meeting as an advocate for change, he had to embody it. He organized his thoughts meticulously. Clutching a notepad, he started jotting down ideas woven with personal anecdotes and grounded in his beliefs. The acts of writing became liberating, words flowed that highlighted not just theoretical ideals but real possibilities. His vision for an educational landscape where students thrived resonated deeply within him. The night before the meeting, Jacob's restlessness escalated. He practiced the presentation in front of the mirror, gauging his expressions, his tone, and the underlying messages of hope he wanted to convey. His own reflection bore an intensity he had not seen before, yet, doubts intruded, stark and insidious. Were the feelings rising from his heart truly reflected in his voice? As dawn broke on the day of the board meeting, Jacob stood on the precipice of this pivotal moment. The air seemed thick with anticipation, both external and internal. He arrived early, entering the conference room and surveying the circular table that would soon host the judgment of his destiny. He took a deep breath, the scent of polished wood and lingering coffee momentarily soothed his fraying nerves. He imagined his father sitting in one of those chairs, silently encouraging him to take bold steps. His father's voice echoed softly in his mind, fear and regret are choices. Choose courage. When the board members filed in, he noted the mix of curious glances and blank stares directed at him. The skeptical member he had noticed previously took her seat, arms crossed defiantly. She looked ready to challenge any claim he made. Jacob felt the fluttering storm within him, but rather than retreat, he leaned into it. As the meeting commenced, Jacob initiated his presentation with renewed vigor, weaving in stories that melded aspiration with pragmatism. He utilized every moment as an opportunity to not only present ideas but to also rally belief in the promise they held. The room fluctuated between tension and tentative intrigue as he expressed his vision, yet he found it hard to ignore that doubt manifested in the board members' smirk, but as questions from the board began to surface, Jacob felt the ground shifting beneath him. The skepticism he anticipated became palpable, and with each inquiry, he sensed a fracture open within himself. Was he truly prepared to shield his ideals against this scrutiny? With each response, however, he unearthed a deeper resource of conviction. The urgency to transform education inspired something poignant within him, a sense of resilience sprouting from the soil of his fears. He began embracing the likelihood of pushback, recognizing that opposition could forge clarity and depth in his proposals. Then came the moment he had been dreading. The skeptical board member zeroed in on him, weapons raised. Can you really convince us that this is more than mere idealism? What proof do you have that you won't become just another voice lost to dreams? Jacob paused, feeling the weight of all his preparation loom over him. He faced her, eyes unwavering. But just as a world of defiance coalesced within him, a new understanding emerged. This was not merely about proving his worth but taking a stand for the future he wished to cultivate. Through the tension in the room, he wasn't just fighting for a place at the table, he was sculpting a legacy. The moment of truth arrived, the time had come to face not just the board, but also his own internal adversities. Jacob took a breath, ready to craft an answer that would carry the weight of his father's dreams and his own newfound hope. Jacob could feel the collective gaze of the board pressing down on him, as if the weight of their skepticism were tangible. For a moment, time stretched, amplifying the sound of his heartbeat to a deafening drum. It didn't escape him that this wasn't merely a question about his project, it was about him, his dreams, his identity, and the path he envisioned for the education system. Here's the proof, he began, his voice steadying. It's not just data that validates my vision, but passion and experience. I've seen students thrive in environments that nurture them, where innovation is grounded in reality. He felt a surge of strength reverberate through him, pushing him to expand on his ideas with intensity and clarity. As he shared stories of students who transcended their circumstances, he became more than just a contender in their eyes, he embodied an advocate for change. Each narrative was not just an anecdote but a lifeline connecting him to those silent souls yearning for hope. The initial skepticism in the room softened slightly, intrigued rather than closed off. He had tapped into a fundamental truth: real change begins with genuine stories. Jacob's self-confidence began to solidify like a fortress against their doubts. He wasn't just presenting theories but engaging their hearts, showing them the profound effect of educational reform. The energy shifted as he watched their expressions transform, a mixture of curiosity and tentative belief mingling in the air. But then, the skeptical board member raised another question, sharper this time. Inspirational stories are compelling, Jacob, but what about when those aspirations collide with budgets and reality? Ideas can be beautiful, but do you have a plan to implement them effectively? Her words cut deep, yet instead of freezing under the scrutiny, he felt his determination solidify into resolve. Where once he would have faltered, Jacob realized that this resistance was no longer a blockade, it was an opportunity. It was about translating passion into practical strategy. We can't afford to ignore the practicalities, that's where true innovation lies. He responded directly, his mind racing to align the ideals he preached with actionable steps. I've already outlined a phased approach in my proposal, one that addresses budgets by utilizing community resources and innovative partnerships. Jacob detailed strategies that were actionable yet ambitious, articulating plans that merged inspiring visions with calculated pragmatism. The board listened, their initial resistance yielding to the inevitability of possibility. He was forging a path, not just for himself, but for a future he deeply wanted to see. As he entered the final moments of his pitch, the weight of vulnerability wrapped around him again. Would they recognize the authenticity behind his blend of idealism and practicality? The air turned electric with ambiguity. He couldn't discern whether they were engaging with enthusiasm or fatigue. Then, something unexpected happened. The board member who had been most skeptical leaned forward, her arms uncrossing. "Resilience is admirable, Jacob. But what happens when you face setbacks, which is inevitable in this field? How will you handle those challenges?" Jacob felt a pulse of fear course through him. Such questions were rooted in his deepest insecurity. Self-doubt had shadowed his progress. But he sensed now that, echoing all his previous preparations, he had cultivated more than a vision, he had fostered a mindset. His response could define him. "I will learn," Jacob declared, conviction enveloping his words. "Failure is a teacher, and I'm ready to embrace it. My commitment is to adapt, to listen, and to grow, not only in success but in setbacks. I won't shy away from mistakes, instead, I'll gather insights from them." The board's attention crescendoed at that moment, as if the air had shifted with his promise. He wasn't just an idealist, he was a practitioner willing to embody dynamic learning, someone who could pivot as circumstances demanded. In that decisive instant, Jacob recognized the transformation occurring not just within him but in the room itself. The board began to nod, concessions of respect flitting across their faces. It felt like a foundation forging beneath his feet. But just as he sensed the tide turning, the weight of uncertainty surged through him again. Would his newfound clarity carry him further, or would the ghosts of past rejections trail behind him, whispering doubt into his ears? He inhaled deeply, knowing the stakes had risen. The path ahead was uncertain, and the board's final verdict lingered in the air like thick fog, casting shadows on his hopeful aspirations. Jacob's confidence flickered in the presence of that burdensome silence, the culmination of his journey drawing nearer. What awaited him on the other side of the decision? The moment of truth was at hand, and he stood at the crossroads of dreams and reality, acutely aware that the next minutes could redefine his trajectory forever. Would he walk away transformed, or would the fears he had battled seep back in to reclaim their hold? Jacob's heart raced as he absorbed the palpable silence that enveloped the room. The board's deliberation felt like an eternity, yet a strange calm began to unfurl within him. He realized that regardless of the impending verdict, he had stepped into a new layer of his identity, one that intertwined vision and resilience. This was a turning point not just in his career, but in the way he perceived himself amidst triumphs and tribulations. That he shifted his focus inward, reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this critical moment. The many times he had hesitated, doubted, or even retreated from challenges felt like distant shadows now. Each setback had sowed seeds of tenacity and wisdom. They had not defined him, but refined him. He smiled slightly, understanding that the real victory wasn't about the outcome, but the metamorphosis he had undergone. As his mind reeled back to the questions posed by the board, he recognized that their inquiries stemmed from a place of pragmatism, not condemnation. Their skepticism had challenged him to evolve, pushing him to merge his lofty ideals with grounded strategies. He had rewritten the script of his own narrative, embracing the role of a lifelong learner rather than a static dreamer. This was his opportunity to model the growth he wished to see in education. The chairwoman's voice cut through the silence. "Jacob, thank you for your presentation. We're ready to move into the discussion." He nodded, suppressing the tremor in his hands as he processed her words. The ball was no longer in his court, it had shifted to theirs, a reality that tangled his hopes with a thin strand of fear. What if their discussion included reasons to walk away? But he pushed that thought aside, adopting a stance he had adopted countless times while mentoring students: centered, open, and ready to face whatever came next. That he took a moment to ground himself, clasping his hands together to steady his pulse. Breath in, breath out. This was about more than just the pitch, it was about influencing a generation through reform, fueling passion in others just as he had cultivated his own. It was precisely in this moment of truth that he understood he had equipped himself for any outcome. Throughout the years, he had accumulated not just knowledge but profound insights about leadership, collaboration, and determination. The board members began exchanging glances, their deliberation evident in their posture. He scrutinized their expressions, searching for cracks in the uncertainty. Recognizing this was his moment for reflection and humility, he spoke up once more, addressing them gently but firmly. I understand the concerns about budgets and potential setbacks. But what we risk is far greater than financial feasibility. We risk the future of our students and the innovation they deserve. I believe we can be both idealistic and pragmatic, unlocking possibilities we haven't yet envisioned. Something in his tone seemed to strike a chord. He noticed a few board members lean in slightly closer. Before this moment, his fear of rejection had clouded his capacity to see possibility, but now he chose to extend that same openness to the board, inviting them into a dialogue shaped by trust. Just as he began to sense a shift, an unexpected voice broke through. Jacob, while your passion is truly inspiring, there is skepticism about how this initiative blends with our existing structures. Are you equipped to navigate internal resistance if it emerges? Again, he faced the shadows of doubt. Resistance, the predictable enemy of innovation. He could recall Tobias, a student who had once resisted a new curriculum designed to foster creativity through chaos. Instead of viewing Tobias's refusal as reflection of failure, Jacob had seen potential for deeper understanding. They had engaged in a dialogue that branched into new territories of learning. Just as no one journeys alone, I believe in engaging those who are hesitant as collaborators, not opponents, Jacob replied, his intensity growing. In situations of resistance, I will not only advocate for our vision but invite those who are skeptical to share their perspectives. We'll work together towards something greater than the sum of our parts. The board's nods began to intermingle with murmurs of consideration, opening potential that was palpable in the air. Yet, beneath that applause of thought rested an undercurrent of conflict still lurking in Jacob's mind. What if he wasn't prepared for the internal battles or ideological pushbacks that lay ahead? The tension bubbled as he stood there, teetering between hope and trepidation, craving clarity in the swirling chaos of ambition. Would this newfound determination withstand the tests that would certainly follow, or would the ghosts of his past haunt him in the engagement of those conversations? As he awaited their response, he wrestled with one undeniable truth: transitions demand not only courage but an unwavering commitment to transform, learn, and adapt in the face of adversity. In that fragile moment, he felt acutely aware that the ultimate challenge was his presentation. It was the journey he had set in motion, and the choices he would face as he navigated the framework of education reform. The room slowly came alive with murmurs, yet one question hung in the air, leaving him at the brink of realization. Could he embrace the resistance, standing boldly for his vision, or would he falter, losing himself in the complexity that awaited? He felt at a precipice, each heartbeat quickening with the uncertainty of both opportunity and potential defeat. The decision now loomed larger than life itself. What awaited him in the moments to come could alter everything. Jacob stood in a charged atmosphere, tensions threading through each heartbeat. The board members' deliberations felt less like a judgment and more like an unveiling, revealing layers of scrutiny and expectation that he sensed reflecting back on him. His thoughts swirled with self-awareness. Would his commitment to this initiative translate into real change, or would he fall short of the vision he had crafted with such care? He took a moment to refocus on the present, visualizing the students who would possibly benefit from his proposal. The faces of young dreamers sparked his passion, reminding him why he had embarked on this path. He envisioned the impact children inspired by creativity, emboldened to connect knowledge with imagination. It was this visceral connection to his purpose that pushed him past the flickers of doubt. A murmur from the board pulled him back to reality. Jacob, you've been very articulate about your passion, but how can you ensure that this initiative won't just create more hurdles? A board member queried, his brow furrowed in concern. Jacob felt the weight of this question slap against his determination. It required a reflection he had prepared for in theory, but the practical implications loomed heavy. To preempt any hurdles, Jacob began, focusing on weaving tactics with inspiration. I will prioritize transparency and connection. Engaging everyone from teachers to parents in the decision-making process is crucial. When people believe they have ownership of a vision, they become allies rather than barriers. He could sense a shift in energy, a few faces softened in understanding. But lurking behind that was the nagging anxiety that despite his best efforts, resistance might still surface, snaring him in its grasp. What if he couldn't rally support? Just as he was about to continue, another board member interjected, "But Jacob, resistance can also come from the most unexpected places. What will happen when your own team questions the viability of this vision?" There it was. The echoes of fear crawled back into his mind, dissent from those he respected deeply. The thought terraced through him, leaving him spiraling in silence. He'd witnessed colleagues buckle under pressure, sidelined by disillusionment. It was a bitter reminder, idealism requires grounding in reality, and what if his dream had no foundation? Every initiative faces friction, he stated, regaining his footing despite the encroaching doubt. Change doesn't occur in a vacuum, it's the connection weaving us together that sets the stage for success. I welcome constructive criticism, recognizing that butting heads with talented individuals can lead to moments of revelation, even if they feel daunting. I trust that creativity thrives in tension. Jacob took a deliberate breath, steadying himself. This wasn't merely about convincing the board anymore. It was an invitation to forge connections. He had practiced leading with vulnerability in the classroom, but this was an entirely different arena. He needed to model what he preached, revealing his own doubts to foster collaboration. A silence settled over the board, each member lost in contemplation. It was a reminder of the complexity of leadership, the dichotomy between vision and practicality, between hopes and realistic constraints. Would he be able to truly embrace his team's dissent without feeling it as a personal affront? As the second stretched into an uncomfortable silence, Jacob felt his determination crystallize into something sharper. He wouldn't shy away from conversations that might be uncomfortable or confrontational. Becoming a catalyst for learning involved being the first to step into the fray, armed with ideas but ready for critique. Though still shrouded in uncertainty, he felt an urgent pivot within. He was prepared to turn potential challenges into opportunities for growth. Yet, questions lingered. Would he be able to maintain that commitment amid resistance? Would he stand firm against internal fears that could derail him? The chairwoman cleared her throat, signaling the board's readiness to respond. Jacob's mind raced with anticipation. He was on the brink of something momentous, but he still faced the turning point of his career. What they were prepared to say could set him down one path or another, intertwining destiny with choice in the most profound sense. With his heart thudding, he remained braced for their response, knowing that whatever unfolded next could irrevocably change the course of his journey and challenge him in ways he had yet to fathom. The void of infinite possibility loomed, and with it, his next move would either solidify his vision or necessitate a transformation he had yet to fully realize. The chairwoman's voice broke the silence, deliberate and measured. "Jacob, your passion is evident, but we need assurance that this initiative stands on sturdier ground than idealistic fervor." Each word cut through the air, leaving a lingering weight that pressed against his resolve. Jacob's pulse quickened. A kaleidoscope of thoughts flickered. Was it just passion or something deeper, something more substantiated? His mind raced through countless scenarios, analyzing the ways he could shift from theory into practice. It was time to solidify his approach with tangible evidence, but how? "Let me outline a step-by-step implementation plan," he began, tapping into his organizing instincts, eager to ground his ideas. "Firstly, we can pilot the initiative with a small team. Regular feedback will be integrated, allowing for genuine adjustments as we move forward. I envision monthly check-ins where everyone can voice their insights and concerns." Each word he spoke felt like a stepping stone, helping him navigate the treacherous waters before him. The board members leaned closer, curiosity mingling with skepticism. Jacob sensed their apprehension, the fine line he was treading between hope and practicality. Convincing the board wasn't just about presenting idealism, it was a test of his ability to transform aspiration into action. He continued, "Additionally, I will provide workshops that equip team members with the necessary skills to participate fully, ensuring buy-in from everyone involved. This isn't just my vision, it's a shared journey." Clarity and purpose drove his words. He felt a spark of adrenaline, cradling both fear and anticipation in equal measure. A younger board member raised her hand, her eyes sharp and focused. What if those workshops don't resonate? What if the team doesn't engage? The history of resistance in our organization is hard to ignore. Each question posed was like a challenge, pushing Jacob deeper into introspection. Then we adapt, he replied, tapping into a well of resilience. If someone feels disenfranchised, we seek to understand why. I'm committed to fostering a culture where silence doesn't exist, where every voice holds significance. My goal isn't just about compliance, it's about creating a vibrant ecosystem of shared ideas. Convinced that he was onto something greater than mere words, he felt buoyed by an inner strength that he hadn't fully realized before. Jacob was no longer merely defending his vision, he was embodying it. But an unsettling thought crept in: would his team reciprocate this trust? What if his efforts weren't enough? In that moment, a revelation sparked within him. His strength lay not in crafting a foolproof plan, but in embracing vulnerability, allowing for fluidity amidst unpredictability. Change is messy, he added, his voice steady now. It's chaotic and unpredictable, but in that chaos lies potential. If we're willing to traverse the discomfort, imagination can flourish. Their gazes were searing, layering doubt and yet a flicker of intrigue. As he finished speaking, Jacob realized he had stepped beyond conventional boundaries. He hadn't merely laid out a strategy, he had opened the door to an evolving conversation, one where the possibilities could flow both ways. As those in the room exchanged glances, Jacob felt a stirring of excitement mixed with uncertainty. What would they say? Would they see his enthusiasm and willingness to adapt as an asset or a risk? Jacob, your enthusiasm has sparked an important dialogue, the chairwoman finally responded, her tone shifting. However, before we move forward, I want to challenge your approach. Remember, leadership means weighing idealism against realities. How will you personally cope when faced with substantial pushback? Knowing the landscape is one thing, handling dissent is another. The blood in Jacob's veins turned cold at the comment. This was the confrontation he dreaded yet knew could come. His instinctual reaction was to rise to the challenge, the necessity of an answer rumbling under his skin. I'll engage directly, he said. Slowly, allowing the gravity of his own words to resonate within him. When faced with dissent, I'll prioritize listening. It's in those moments of discomfort that the most invaluable lessons often appear, forcing us to adapt and rethink. With each heartbeat, Jacob felt the tension ratchet up within himself. There was only one way forward, he had to be the leader he envisioned, ready to contend with hurdles and honing his capability to foster change through courage and resilience. As the board members processed his response, Jacob sensed the turning tide within his own confidence, yet a shadow of doubt loomed. Would he indeed be able to hold the space for dissent and emerge stronger? Would he remain committed to his vision, even when it might fracture under conflicting ideas? The room was thick with anticipation, each moment dragging out like an unraveling thread. Jacob's next steps could either solidify his conviction or unravel everything he'd worked toward. The choice ahead was profound, and just beyond the cusp of confrontation lay the unknown. He was ready, yet uncertain. Was this the metamorphosis he sought, or merely the start of deeper challenges on his path? The air hung heavy as the board members exchanged glances, the chairwoman finally signaling the end of the discussion. The meeting concluded without a definitive verdict on Jacob's initiative, leaving him with a blend of excitement and uncertainty that felt like an albatross around his neck. He stepped out of the conference room and into the hallway, where the waning afternoon light filtered through the large windows, casting long shadows that mirrored the weight of the day's conversations. Walking slowly, Jacob replayed the meeting in his mind. Doubts crept in like the chill of dusk. The sharp questions from his colleagues echoed, haunting him. How well would he handle dissent? More importantly, how secure was his own belief in his vision? A soft buzz from his phone interrupted his thoughts, pulling him back into the moment. A message from Emma, his closest colleague. Want to grab a coffee? I could use a sounding board. It read that he didn't hesitate. Jacob needed an ally, someone who could challenge him sincerely yet compassionately. They met at a nearby cafe, where the familiar aromas of coffee mingled with the chatter of patrons seeking refuge from the day's pressures. As he settled into a booth across from Emma, he felt the tension in his chest begin to ease. Her warm smile offered reassurance. "So, how did it go?" she asked, leaning in. Jacob took a breath, gathering his thoughts. They appreciated the idea but had serious reservations. "I need to anticipate pushback better than I did today." Emma nodded knowingly. "You put yourself out there, and that takes courage. But it sounds like a tightrope act you're walking between vision and doubt." "Exactly," he replied, his mind racing with his next steps. "The real test is how to maintain enthusiasm while navigating resistance. I think that's my biggest hurdle. What if you turn the resistance into an opportunity for collaboration?" Emma suggested, her brow furrowing in contemplation. "Instead of seeing dissent as a wall, approach it as feedback. Engage them in redefining the vision together." The suggestion struck a chord within Jacob. What if I structured a brainstorming session, creating a platform for everyone to contribute? It could turn opposition into ownership. "Now you're thinking," Emma affirmed, her enthusiasm palpable. "People tend to support what they help create." A renewed sense of purpose ignited in Jacob. Ideas flowed between them. They discussed potential themes for these sessions, the importance of a shared narrative, and ways to invite honest conversation. Ideas he hadn't considered before took shape, weaving a tapestry of connection between him and the board. In that moment, clarity blossomed. Jacob realized he had despised rehearsal, but now he craved practicing the very thing that felt unsustainable: vulnerability. Taking risks was crucial, both in inviting dissent and sparking dialogue. He was propelled by newfound insight. If he could help others feel comfortable sharing their dissenting viewpoints, the fear that had lurked inside him would not only diminish but transform into a collaborative energy. The power of the initiative would come from the collective, and he didn't have to shoulder this alone. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting warm hues across the cafe's interior. As their conversation deepened, Jacob caught the depth of Emma's understanding. He knew this was the pivotal moment of change he had long sought. But as optimism surged, a gnawing thought tugged at him: what if they rejected his proposal again? Would his vulnerability expose him to even greater criticism? Feeling the weight of those questions, Jacob understood he was standing at another crossroads, one that carried the potential for growth or frustration. "Jacob," Emma interrupted his spiral, noticing his distraction. "Whatever happens next, just remember you're trying to craft a dialogue, not a decree. You've built trust here, and that counts for something." Her words, meant to reassure, also ignited an inner conflict. Trust could foster collegiality, but would the board reciprocate? The looming stakes were yet to be established, and he was left wondering, even as the warmth of the cafe engulfed him, how far he would be willing to go to defend that trust when faced with the inevitable pushback. The challenge lay ahead, waiting to be faced, one that would demand not just a leader's courage but a person's essence. Jacob realized he stood at the edge of more than a professional transformation. This was a test of his identity altogether. His heart quickened, and as they stood to leave, the next step emerged clearly: a meeting that would require him to confront dissent head-on. But could he hold on to what he had discovered, or would fear envelop him like a fog? As their conversation drew to a close, Jacob knew one thing: he was on the brink of something vital, and just beyond the horizon lay the unpredictable landscape of conflict. The true journey was only beginning. The following morning greeted Jacob with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. As he prepared for the brainstorming session, his mind raced with strategies, scenarios, and questions that punctuated his resolve. He gathered his notes, each scribbled idea a puzzle piece in the greater vision he hoped to assemble with the board. Vulnerability loomed like a specter, but he understood that it was a necessary companion on this journey. Arriving early at the conference room, Jacob felt the cool air against his skin, its crispness grounding him in a moment that felt both significant and fragile. Setting up the room, he arranged chairs in a semicircle, visualizing a collaborative dialogue rather than a traditional meeting where hierarchy dictated participation. The room, usually filled with tension, bristled with potential that would either elevate his vision or plunge him into despair. As he waited for the board members to arrive, he practiced his opening line. Communication was an art Jacob had often struggled with, but today he was determined to convey not just the what but the why. He envisioned the conversations Emma previously suggested, passionate, open, and collaborative. Perhaps, he thought, if he could share his struggles alongside his vision, he could foster a sense of ownership among his colleagues. When the board members filed in, he noticed the varying expressions on their faces, some curious, others skeptical. Jacob took a deep breath. He had committed to being authentic, allowing them to see the cracks in his confidence. He was drawing in the warmth of their skepticism, hoping to transform it into a shared objective rather than an adversarial stance. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady despite the flutter in his stomach. "Today, I want to invite you into a discussion. We're not just here to critique my proposal, we're here to collaborate on how we can reshape our future together." As the meeting unfolded, initial resistance manifested in challenging questions, yet Jacob found himself embracing the discomfort rather than retreating. Responses came fast. Some suggested adjusting timelines, while others raised concerns about resource allocation. Each contribution felt like a spark igniting deeper exploration rather than a flame of criticism. Jacob leaned into the tension, inviting each member to share their concerns more extensively. "I value your opinions," he said, "and if we can harness our collective wisdom, we can turn these concerns into a stronger foundation for our initiative." What struck him in the ensuing dialogue was the revelation of previously unspoken ambitions and fears among his colleagues. As he listened and responded, he recognized that vulnerability was a two-way street. Allowing others to express dissent opened the door for their visions as well. Then, a surprising moment emerged when Clara, the board's most reserved member, revealed her excitement about the potential impact of Jacob's initiative but also her fear of implementation. "I want this to work, but I need to know we can handle the pushback," she confessed, her eyes reflecting the vulnerability he had risked. Jacob felt a surge of energy, a connection ignited not just because of a shared goal, but through authentic discourse. The shift was palpable. The conversation morphed from one-sided critiques to a rich exchange of ideas, illuminating paths that lay beyond mere agreement. As the discussion waned, Jacob saw their faces light up. Hesitancy transformed into enthusiasm, a palpable buzz filled the room. A plan started to take shape, one that had everyone's input, and with it, a sense of ownership began to crystallize. But the euphoria of the moment was tinged with the weight of reality. What if they still hesitated at the final vote? What if this emerging unity was merely an illusion, and in the end, they reverted to previous doubts? Jacob stepped back, absorbing the collaborative spirit flourished within the room. He realized he had ignited something far more potent than agreement. He had begun forging a bond of trust. Yet, as he concluded the meeting, the lingering unease whispered still. While they had made strides today, the true test awaited. He had to solidify their trust and commitment in writing. Impromptu conversations were one thing, formal proposals another entirely. With the session before him, Jacob found comfort in knowing that today had unveiled the essence of leadership he yearned for: transformative dialogue built on vulnerability and understanding. The horizon glimmered invitingly ahead, yet he remained acutely aware of the stakes involved. As the board filed out, Jacob's resolve deepened. He would need one more push to ensure this momentum endured. The need for a decisive follow-up emerged clearly in his mind, one that would entrench the newfound collaboration into structured action. He couldn't lose sight of this essential connection. It was time to assert a plan that could weather the storm, but would they be ready to commit beyond today's enthusiasm? Would his journey from doubt to hope truly solidify into action? The answers awaited just beyond the ink of his pen and the finality of solid decisions. Jacob remained in the boardroom long after the others had left, the echoes of discussion still swirling around him. The energy from the brainstorming session had propelled him to renewed heights, yet uncertainty lingered like a specter at his shoulder. He realized now that the inner battle he had faced wasn't merely about overcoming his doubts, it was about transforming those doubts into a foundation for growth. This was his moment of reckoning, a culmination not just of a proposal, but of his identity and vision. In the days that followed, Jacob deliberately approached the next steps. The collaboration sparked during the brainstorming session had unveiled unforeseen pathways. He drafted a comprehensive follow-up proposal, integrating input harvested from his colleagues. With every line penned, he felt his confidence consolidate, standing on the cusp of addressing not just an educational transformation but reclaiming his narrative. Each meeting with the board thereafter reflected a marked shift. Rather than acting in a vacuum, Jacob facilitated input, fostering an environment where ideas flourished. Comments sourced from the previous session became building blocks of a burgeoning unity. As they began to see momentum, he felt elation but also caution. This collective energy had the weight of a fragile bloom. He was determined to nurture it. As weeks passed, Jacob received a request for a presentation at a regional education conference. This opportunity thrilled him with a blend of anxiety and exhilaration. It wasn't just a chance to showcase his initiative, it was a platform to illuminate the importance of vulnerability in educational reform. He recalled how uncertainty had once engulfed him, how he had allowed it to stifle his voice and suffocate aspirations. Now, he was ready. The day of the conference arrived, and as Jacob took the stage, he felt a tide of purpose swell within him. He had spent nights refining his message, each word was a brushstroke painting a vision for change. As he shared his journey, the struggles, the collaborative breakthroughs, he saw the audience's engagement flicker like a current, pulling them into his narrative. In that moment, he understood his position had transformed. He was no longer the imposter standing before a tight audience, fearing judgment. He was a vessel of change, a harbinger of what education could become. He explored the complex weave of vulnerability and strength in leadership, illustrating how allowing dissent could fuel authenticity and trust. The applause echoed deafeningly as he completed his presentation, drowning the whispers of doubt that once plagued him. He felt like he had not only communicated a vision but had also inspired others to take their own leaps of faith. Weeks later, as Jacob stood at the desk in his classroom, the vibrancy of his students surrounded him. He was approached by a creditable journal in the education field, inviting him to publish articles on his experience about fostering collaborative leadership in schools. This recognition validated not just his journey, but also the vision he had held so tightly to, a vision that now intertwined with the hopes and aspirations of his students. Jacob reflected on how remarkably he had transcended his previous self. The imposter syndrome had given way to self-awareness and authenticity. The fear of inadequacy was replaced by a solid confidence established through action. He had learned that resilience came from accepting vulnerability, and with it, he had not only forged a path for himself but had also laid groundwork for others. His legacy was not merely the initiative but the empowerment he had harnessed from his father's journals, the stories of sacrifice coloring his approach. With his newfound clarity, Jacob embraced the next step. He was not facing the echoes of missed opportunities anymore. He was on a trajectory defined by ambition and supported by courage. Expanding his influence, he now envisioned a summer workshop that integrated community voices into the education revolution he sought to create. This would be a platform for shared experiences, one that would lay a foundation for future leaders beyond his classroom. He felt a surge of determination. He could not only envision change but enact it. This was the essence of Jacob's transformation. Where he once lingered in doubt, he now stood confidently in purpose, making waves of impact ripple through those around him. Now, do not wait another moment. You need to subscribe now to this channel to follow more incredible stories of personal transformation. Leave a like to help our community grow, it matters. Comment below with your thoughts on this powerful conclusion. And most importantly, share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need this inspiration in their lives. Your support can spark change. Don't hesitate.